The rain against the glass is a familiar sound. A dull, persistent tap. It's 6 a.m. in the suburbs of London, and the light filtering into the kitchen is a watery, weak gray. Rachel Morgan is already dressed. She stands by the counter, packing a small lunchbox for her daughter. A pink unicorn smiles from the plastic lid. Emma is 6. Rachel is 34. She moves with a quiet efficiency. Everything in their small, two-story house has its place. The house is like that, a neat, stable box in a row of other neat, stable boxes. It is a picture of middle-class success, on the surface. Rachel hears the shower shut off upstairs. Then, silence. Not the silence of peace, but the empty silence of waiting. Daniel is in the bathroom. He will be in there for another 20 minutes. The shower itself was only 5. The other 15 minutes are for the phone, for the world that exists. The emails, the messages, the validation, before he has to engage with this one. Emma, sweetheart, toast is ready. Emma pads downstairs, rubbing her eyes, her own unicorn pajamas a perfect match for the lunchbox. Is Daddy coming? He's getting ready, Rachel says. It is the non-answer, the one she has perfected over the years. Daniel, 38, finally appears. He looks good. He always looks good. A successful marketing manager, dressed in a sharp shirt, his hair still damp. He leans down and kisses the top of Emma's head. Morning, pumpkin. He glances at Rachel, a brief nod. Rachel. He grabs the mug of coffee she has already poured, his eyes already flicking down to his phone, which he'd brought downstairs with him. The breakfast table is a perfect map of their life. Emma's colorful bowl, Daniel's sleek black phone, and Rachel's empty cup. The atmosphere is normal, repetitive. It is suffocating, like a loop that never ends. Daniel leaves first. The sound of his car door slamming is sharp in the wet morning air. Rachel stays behind, cleaning the breakfast dishes, her own phone resting on the counter. She's waiting. Emma's school is supposed to call about the parent-teacher meetings. A phone vibrates on the polished granite. Not hers. It's Daniel's. He forgot it. It vibrates again. And again. Insistent. Rachel glances at it. What if the school tried his number first? Emma's name is on both emergency contact lists. She picks it up. The screen lights up, still unlocked for a brief moment. WhatsApp. A name she vaguely recognizes from his work stories. Madison B. His assistant. The notification preview shows a video thumbnail. Her heart doesn't race. It just stops. She taps the notification banner, and the thread opens. Madison B. Poor Mr. Daniels. Coming home must feel like a punishment. Hug emoji. Punishment. Rachel's fingers feel numb. She looks down. Below Madison's message is one from Daniel. Sent last night. Around 10 p.m. Daniel. Video attachment. Daniel. This is exactly why I'd rather work late than come home. The video. The thumbnail is dark, grainy. It's her. It's Rachel. Standing in the hallway, her face tight with anger, her voice sharp. She recognizes the moment instantly. Last night. Emma, overtired, refusing to do her reading homework. Rachel, tired and frayed from a long day, had finally snapped. Just do it, Emma. Why must you make everything so difficult? He had been standing in the doorway of his office. He had been silent. He had been filming. He didn't film it to talk about it. He didn't film it to share his concern. He filmed it to send to her, to Madison B. As evidence, as justification, as entertainment. Rachel stands perfectly still in the quiet kitchen. There is no scream. There are no tears. There is only a cold, hollowing sensation, starting in her stomach and spreading like ice to her fingertips. A sudden, absolute frost. She stares at the words. A punishment. Poor Mr. Daniels. She locks the phone. She places it back on the counter. Exactly as she found it, screen down. She turns on the tap. The water is cold. She washes her hands, methodically scrubbing her palms and fingers. She watches the soap foam and rinse away, as if she is washing away a layer of skin, as if nothing has happened at all. But in the dark reflection of the window above the sink, her eyes have changed. They are no longer tired. They are empty, and they are watching. Everything proceeds as normal. That is the most terrifying part. She takes Emma to school. Daniel has already come back for his phone. She heard the front door open and close while she was getting Emma's coat. He must have seen her car in the drive. He must have known she was home. He didn't call out. He just took his phone and left again. In the car, Rachel turns on the radio, needing a distraction. A bright, cheerful voice on the news. Experts note a significant surge in post-pandemic divorce filings. As couples reevaluate what they truly want, Rachel turns it off. Yeah, the sudden silence is deafening. Mommy, are you sad? Emma asks from the back seat, her small voice cutting through the tension. Rachel meets her daughter's eyes in the rearview mirror. No, sweetie. Mommy's just thinking. At her office, she is a ghost. She is an accountant. Her job is numbers. Numbers are clean. They are logical. They balance. Today she stares at a spreadsheet. The digits blur. The sound of the keyboard next to her, clack, 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 sounds like tiny hammers. The gurgle of the coffee machine in the break room sounds intrusive, almost violent. The polite laughter of her colleagues by the water cooler feels like a language she no longer speaks. She is watching herself type, watching herself nod during a brief virtual meeting, watching herself sip water from her bottle. She feels as though she is floating somewhere near the ceiling, looking down at the woman who is pretending to be Rachel Morgan. He comes home late, past 11. Rachel is in bed, the lights off, feigning sleep. The room is dark. She hears him in the hallway, his voice a low, soft murmur. She tenses. He's on the phone. No, you did the right thing. It was perfect. Thank you, Muddy. The voice is gentle. It's warm. It's the voice he used when they were first dating. The voice he saves for Emma when she is hurt. It is not a voice he has used for Rachel in years. He ends the call. He enters the bedroom, undresses in the dark, and slides into the bed. He doesn't touch her. He sighs. A sound of heavy satisfaction, or perhaps just exhaustion. Within minutes, his breathing deepens. He is asleep. Rachel lies awake. The darkness of the room feels heavy, solid. She stares at the ceiling. She listens to the man beside her sleeping peacefully. The man who filmed her pain. The man who called his home a punishment. Her hand, under the duvet, slowly clenches into a fist, the nails digging so hard into her own palm that she knows she will leave marks. The silence in the room is no longer empty. It is heavy. It has a shape. It is alive. The first thing Rachel felt was the sting in her palm. She woke up before the alarm. The gray light of yesterday was gone, replaced by a sharp, brilliant sunlight. The kind of sunlight that exposes everything. She uncurled her fingers. 4 perfect crescent-shaped bruises, new and purple against the soft skin of her palm. The memory of the night before, lying in the dark, fist clenched, listening to him breathe, crashed back into her. It was real. The video, the messages. Poor Mr. Daniels. She turned her head. Daniel was still asleep, on his back, mouth slightly open. His face, usually handsome and composed, looked slack, vulnerable. A surge of something hot and bitter rose in her throat. She had loved this face. She had built a life around this face. Now she looked at him, and she felt nothing. No, not nothing. Worse, she felt a cold, analytical curiosity. He was no longer her husband. He was a subject, a puzzle, a threat. She slipped out of bed. The floorboards were cold beneath her feet. She went through the motions. Shower, dress, a simple gray sweater. She looked in the mirror. The woman looking back was pale. Her eyes were too wide, circled by a faint, bruised darkness. But they were steady. They were awake. She went downstairs to the kitchen. Yesterday, this room was a prison. Today, it was a laboratory. She made the coffee. She heard the familiar sounds. The whir of the grinder, the drip of the hot water. But they sounded different, sharper, more defined. Her senses were heightened, as if a filter had been removed from her perception of the world. She was hyper-aware. She heard his footsteps on the stairs, heavier than hers. He entered the kitchen. He was already on his phone. He didn't say good morning. He simply grunted, moved past her to grab the mug she had just filled, and sat down at the table. The ritual, the morning paper replaced by a glowing screen. Rachel sat opposite him. She watched. She watched the light from the window. It hit the side of his face. It illuminated the small, angry razor nick on his chin he hadn't bothered to cover. It reflected on the polished surface of the table, making the few breadcrumbs from yesterday's toast look like boulders. It shone on the back of his phone, which he had, for the first time in months, placed screen down on the table. A micro-gesture, a tell. He was hiding something. Or rather, he was now actively aware that he had something to hide. Did he know he'd left it yesterday? Did he know she'd seen? His face was a mask of concentration, scrolling, a faint frown lined between his brows. Emma came downstairs, bright and bubbly, a stark contrast to the glacial silence between her parents. Mommy, Daddy, guess what? We get to paint today. We're painting volcanoes. Instantly, Daniel's face transformed. He looked up from his phone, and a wide, genuine smile spread across his face. The frown line vanished. His eyes softened. Volcanoes, pumpkin? That's amazing. Are you going to make a red one? A big explosion? Yes, with glitter. Miss Potts said we can use glitter. Well, you'd better make a good one, he said, reaching out to ruffle her hair. I want to see it tonight. It was the voice. The warm, gentle voice from the hallway last night. The voice he reserved for her. And for Emma. The voice that was never, ever for Rachel. Rachel watched this transformation. It was like watching a performer put on a mask. The mask of good, attentive father. Emma, satisfied, turned to her toast. And just like that, the mask came off. Daniel's smile vanished. His eyes went flat. He looked back down at his phone. The transaction was complete. The silence stretched again, broken only by the sound of Emma munching her toast. Rachel decided to conduct an experiment. She cleared her throat. Daniel. He didn't look up. I was thinking, she said, her voice even. Maybe we should take Emma to the park in Kingston this weekend. The weather is supposed to be nice. A pause. He finished typing a message. He sighed. A long, put-upon sigh. He looked up, his eyes cold. Kingston? On a Saturday? The traffic will be a nightmare. I've probably got to catch up on work anyway. It's just an idea, Rachel said. It's not a good one, he replied. He pushed his chair back. I'm going to grab a shower. He left the kitchen, leaving his coffee half finished. Rachel stared at the spot where he had been. She had her data. Volcanoes with glitter. Yes. Family time in Kingston. No. She finished cleaning the kitchen. The routine was a comfort. Wiping the counter, loading the dishwasher. Each clink of a plate was a small, grounding sound. But her mind was racing. She was observing everything. Every tiny detail she had ignored for years. The way he spoke to her. The tone. It wasn't just indifferent. It was dismissive. It was the tone one uses for a subordinate. Or a servant. Don't nag. It's not a good one. This is why I'd rather work late. Poor Mr. Daniels. A picture was forming. A dark, ugly picture. She had not been a wife. She had been management. The boring, administrative side of his life. The part that dealt with council tax and school runs and park visit logistics. Madison B was the escape. The fun part. The part that listened and sympathized and sent hug emojis. She bundled Emma into the car. The silence in the car was different. It was Emma's. She was usually chatty, but today, she was quiet, looking out the window, tracing patterns on the fogged glass. Rachel glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Everything okay, sweetheart? Emma was quiet for a long moment. Mommy? Yes, love? They stopped at a red light. The car was perfectly still. Why doesn't Daddy laugh when you talk? The question hit Rachel with the force of a physical blow. It knocked the air from her lungs. She had been so focused on her own discovery, her own pain, her own silent observations. She had forgotten about the other observer in the house. The 6-year-old who sees everything. Rachel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. What do you mean, baby? At breakfast? You said Kingston and Park. Yes, I did. And he made his frowny face, his work face. But when I said volcanoes, Emma continued, her voice small and logical. He did his smiley face. He didn't do a smiley face for your park. The light turned green. A car honked behind them. Rachel pressed the accelerator, her foot trembling slightly. Daddy has a lot on his mind from work, sweetheart. A lot of serious things. His work face is just his thinking face. Oh, a pause. So, he doesn't like parks? He likes parks, Rachel said, her voice cracking slightly. She cleared her throat. He was thinking very hard about his work. A lie. A thin, brittle lie. Emma seemed to accept it, turning back to the window. But Rachel couldn't breathe. He didn't do a smiley face for your park. Her daughter, her 6-year-old child, was already learning to read the temperature of the room. She was already learning to differentiate between the person who gets smiles and the person who gets frowns. She was learning that mommy gets the frowny face. The message from the universe, the one she had been given, was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. Ta kom te ngan ngui khak fan boy, ning ta ko te ngan vetung do laplai kwa te he sao. The wound was already repeating. Emma was watching. Emma was learning that this was what a relationship looked like. That it was normal for a husband to be cold to his wife. That it was normal for a father to dismiss a mother. This wasn't just about Daniel and Madison B. This was about Emma. And this was about the legacy of silence. The inheritance of pain. That was being passed down right here in this car on the way to school. That day, something inside Rachel fractured. But it wasn't a breaking. It was a hatching. The pain from yesterday, the shock, the cold, the numbness, was gone. It had been burned away and replaced by something else. Something cold and hard and sharp. Contempt. She looked at the man she had married. The man who filmed his wife's anger to gain sympathy from his assistant. The man who couldn't be bothered to hide his disdain for his wife, even in front of his child. He wasn't a monster. He was just weak, pathetic. Poor Mr. Daniels. The phrase replayed in her mind. But now it had a new meaning. It was, she realized, probably true. He was poor. Poor in spirit. Poor in courage. Poor in character. She began to build a wall. A high, invisible wall inside herself. She was no longer his wife. She was an anthropologist, studying a failing civilization. She did not argue. She did not ask questions. She did not cry. She just watched. She watched him text under the table at dinner. She watched him manufacture arguments out of thin air. Why did you buy this brand of milk? You know I hate it. It was the only one they had. She watched him flinch when she entered a room unexpectedly. Her silence, which had once been a sign of her endurance, her complicity, her fatigue, was now her weapon. It was no longer the empty, suffocating silence of a failing marriage. It was the full, heavy, judging silence of a woman who knew the truth. And it made him deeply, deeply uncomfortable. He would pace, he would sigh, he would try to provoke her. You're quiet tonight. Just thinking. About what? About volcanoes, she'd say, with a tiny, empty smile. He would stare at her, unnerved, and retreat to his office. The balance of power had shifted. He didn't know why. He just knew that the woman who used to fill the silences, with questions, with chatter, with attempts at connection, was gone. In her place was this observer, this quiet, watchful stranger who looked at him not with love or even anger, but with something he couldn't name, something that looked almost like pity, or perhaps contempt. The rifts were no longer invisible. They were wide, gaping canyons, and Rachel was finally on the other side. The house settled into a new, cold rhythm. The silence Rachel had built as a defense was now just a fact. It was the air they breathed. Daniel seemed to have accepted it. He too had retreated. He stopped trying to provoke her with small, biting comments about the milk or her mood. He simply coexisted. They were two strangers living in the same house, orbiting their one bright sun, Emma. With Emma, they were a pantomime of a family. They were mommy and daddy. They smiled. They coordinated. I'll pick her up today. Your meeting runs late, he'd text. Thank you. I've left her dinner in the fridge, she'd reply. Polite. Efficient. Like colleagues managing a difficult, long-term project. The moment Emma was in bed, the performance ended. The masks were put away. He would go to his office. She would go to the living room or the bedroom and read. They did not speak. They did not touch. The house was quiet. Too quiet. One evening, a Thursday, the air was thick and heavy with impending rain. Rachel had just finished tucking Emma in. She'd read the story about the volcano twice. Mommy, Emma had whispered, her eyes heavy with sleep. Yes, my love? Is Daddy's work face gone? Rachel's hand froze on the blanket. She stroked her daughter's hair. Yes, baby? His work face is all gone. Good, Emma mumbled, and turned into her pillow. The words, so innocent, twisted in Rachel's gut. She stayed until Emma's breathing was deep and even, then she quietly pulled the door closed. She walked down the hallway. It was dark, save for the sliver of light from Daniel's office at the far end. The door was ajar. She could hear the faint, rapid click-clack of his keyboard, a sound of urgency. She wasn't spying, she was just walking to her own bedroom to be alone. But as she passed the open door, a reflex, born of the last few weeks of observation, made her glance inside. He wasn't there. The leather chair was empty. The screen was on. He must have just stepped away, perhaps to the bathroom. The screen was bright. In the dark room, an unlocked portal. He'd been getting careless. Or maybe he just didn't care if she saw anymore. Rachel stopped, Her feet, in their soft slippers, made no sound on the hall runner. She didn't enter the room. She stood in the shadow of the doorway. She could see his email client. A new message, half written. The tone field was stark and clear. Madison B. His cursor was blinking at the end of a line, waiting for his next thought. Rachel didn't need to read the whole thing. The context was irrelevant. The details of his day, the complaints about his clients, the office politics, all of it was just noise. Her eyes, sharp and focused, landed on the last full sentence, the one he had just finished typing. And I'm just tired, Maddie, so tired of the coldness. It feels like I'm living with a ghost. Sometimes I wonder if things would be easier if I'd met you first. Rachel did not breathe. The air in the hallway became thick, unbreathable. If I'd met you first. It wasn't a confession of an affair. It was a confession of a wish to erase her, to erase their life together, to erase Emma's entire existence. The video had been a betrayal of her trust. This was a betrayal of her reality. It was a statement that their entire shared history, their home, their child, was the difficult path, the mistake, the coldness he complained about. He was complaining to the very person who had caused it. The irony was so bitter, so profound, it almost made her want to laugh. She heard a sound, the toilet flushing down the hall. He was coming back. She did not panic. She did not run. She simply took one slow step back, deeper into the shadows. She was a ghost. He was right about that. She watched him walk back into the room, his shoulders slumped, sighing. He had no idea she was 10 feet away, in the dark. He sat down. He stared at the screen for a long moment, at the words he had just written. Then, he highlighted the entire sentence. Sometimes, I wonder if things would be easier if I'd met you first. Rachel watched. He deleted it. He sat for another moment. Then, he typed something new. Anyway, enough complaining. You were a star in that meeting today. I owe you a drink. Tomorrow, he hit send. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face. For him, the moment of doubt, the deep confession, was gone, erased, replaced with a casual invitation. For Rachel, it was seared into her memory. It was permanent. It was the final piece of evidence. She backed away, soundlessly. She didn't go to their bedroom. The thought of lying in that bed, the bed they shared, was repulsive. She turned and walked to the other end of the hall. She pushed open the door to Emma's room. The air was warm. The small unicorn nightlight cast a soft pink glow on the wall. She moved to the side of the bed. Emma was sleeping. Her small face was a picture of absolute peace. Her mouth was slightly open, her breathing a soft, rhythmic shoosh. One small hand was clutched around the ear of a worn, gray rabbit. Rachel stood there, just watching her. This was the only thing in this entire house that was not broken. The only part of her life that was not a lie. This was the face that existed, because he had met Rachel first. This small, perfect, innocent life. And in his email, he had wished her away. Rachel felt a sudden, fierce wave of protection, so strong it almost buckled her knees. It was a physical ache. The wound wouldn't be passed down. This child, sleeping in her unicorn pajamas, would not grow up in a house built on whispers and contempt. She would not learn to read the work face at the breakfast table. She would not learn that love is a performance, or that a mother's place is to be a silent, convenient ghost. Rachel would not become her own mother, and Emma would not become Rachel. She leaned down, her face close to her daughter's, and breathed in the smell of her hair, soap and sleep. "I've got you," she whispered, so quietly it was not even a sound. "I promise." She pulled the door closed, leaving the warm pink light behind. She walked downstairs. The house was tomb silent. She did not turn on the lights. She knew the way by heart. She walked through the living room, past the sofa where he would soon sit, nursing a whiskey and scrolling on his phone, oblivious. She walked into the kitchen. It was the same room, the crime scene. The streetlight outside, filtered through the damp leaves of the oak tree, cast a weak, watery light on the counters. The green light of the microwave clock read 11:52 p.m. She opened the refrigerator. The cold, white light flooded the kitchen, harsh and artificial, making her look like a statue. She reached for the glass jug of water. She closed the door, and the kitchen was plunged back into darkness. She stood at the counter, the exact spot where his phone had vibrated and changed the world. She took a glass from the cabinet. The clink as it touched the granite counter was loud, like a gunshot in the silence. She poured the water. She lifted the glass. It was ice cold, and it made her hand ache. She drank, a long, deep swallow. She stared out the window into the black, wet garden. The neighbor's porch light was off. There was only darkness. This was it. The first time she stood here, she was a wife, shocked, betrayed, numb. Tonight she was just a woman. And she was done. The video was the what. The email was the why. Everything had started here at the sink, with a discovery. And everything was ending here, in the dark, with a decision. The quiet house had finally told her the truth. She finished the water, placed the empty glass on the counter with a quiet, definitive click, and turned to face the dark hallway. The war was over. All that was left was the surrender, or perhaps the liberation. The next morning, Rachel woke up, and for the first time in 10 years, she knew exactly who she was. She was not a wife, she was not a partner. She was a single mother, in training. She was a performer, giving her final act in a long-running, tragic play. She was an escape artist, quietly, meticulously, planning her exit. The decision, made in the dark kitchen, had not brought her peace. It had brought her clarity. And clarity was a cold, hard, functional thing. The man sleeping beside her was no longer a person. He was a problem, a logistical challenge. The house, the shared bank accounts, the car, they were assets to be divided. Emma was the only thing that mattered. She got up. The routine was the same, but the purpose was different. Yesterday she made coffee because it was part of the ritual. Today, she made coffee because she needed the caffeine to stay sharp. She moved through the house with a new quiet energy. It was the energy of a person with a secret, a person with a plan. When Daniel came downstairs, he was, as usual, absorbed in his phone. He grabbed his mug. "Morning," he grunted. "Good morning," Rachel replied. Her voice was clear, normal, polite. He stopped. He actually stopped and looked up from his phone, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He had expected the same cold, heavy silence of the past few weeks. He had expected the ghost. He was not prepared for normal. Rachel simply smiled. A small, neutral, customer service smile. She turned back to the counter to butter Emma's toast. Daniel stared at the back of her head for a second, confused. The script had changed, and he hadn't been given the new lines. He frowned, shook his head as if to clear it, and sat down at the table, retreating to the safety of his screen. 1-0 to Rachel. This became the new game. Rachel was no longer silent. Silence, she had learned, was a statement. It was a visible wound. What she adopted now was far more effective. She adopted neutrality. She was pleasant. She was efficient. She was absent. She was a perfectly polite, functional, and utterly remote stranger. She was the voice on a recorded helpline. Press 1 for dinner. Press 2 for school run logistics. All other options and all other emotions were no longer available. The weight of her old silence had been heavy, but it was a shared weight. He could blame it, point to it, use it as his excuse. The weight of her new neutrality was unbearable, because it offered him nothing to fight against. It was like punching a cloud. The silence that had once filled the house like a thick fog had now solidified. It became a new entity, a guest at their table. Dinner, a week later. The sound of cutlery scraping against porcelain was deafening. It was the only sound, besides Emma's cheerful monologue about a lost pencil case. And Miss Potts said, "I could borrow a blue one, but my favorite is the red one, so I hope we find it." "We'll find it, sweetie," Rachel said, smiling. The smile was real. It was 100% for Emma. And then the smile would switch off, like a light, the moment she turned to Daniel. "Could you pass the salt?" she asked him. Her tone was flat, the same tone she'd used at the supermarket. "Excuse me, do you have this in a size 10? Daniel slid the salt shaker across the table. Too hard. It rattled and almost tipped over. He was angry. She could feel it rolling off him in waves. Her new, pleasant emptiness was driving him insane. He needed her to be the ghost. He needed her to be the cold, resentful, quiet woman he could complain about to Madison. This functional woman, this polite automaton, she didn't fit his narrative. She gave him no ammunition. "So," he said, his voice tight, trying to sound casual, "you're in a better mood." Rachel looked up from her plate. She met his gaze. Her eyes were clear, unblinking. "Am I?" "Yeah. You're Talking. He said it like an accusation. I've always talked, Daniel. No, you haven't. Not for weeks. You've been walking around here like a martyr. Now, all of a sudden you're fine. Emma's head swiveled between them, her small face suddenly anxious. The change in tone was obvious, even to her. Daddy has his work face, she whispered to her plate. Rachel's heart cracked. She put her fork down. She did not engage with Daniel. She turned to her daughter. It's okay, love. Daddy's just tired. Yeah, how about we look for that pencil case right after dinner? We'll make it a treasure hunt. Emma brightened. With a map? With a map, Rachel confirmed. She had done it, deflected, disarmed, refocused. Daniel saw it. He saw how skillfully she had bypassed him, neutralized his aggression, and recentered the evening around Emma. He put his own fork down with a clack. For God's sake, Rachel, he hissed, his voice low. Can you stop? Just stop. Stop what? She asked, her voice genuinely curious. Stop this act. This perfect mother act. This ice cold. Whatever it is you're doing. He was desperate for a fight. He was starving for it. He needed the raw, emotional validation of a confrontation. He needed her to scream, to cry, to accuse him. He needed her to be the crazy, irrational wife he'd described in his video. It would justify everything. It would make his betrayal righteous. Rachel looked at him. She saw the desperation. She saw the weakness. She saw the man who filmed his wife to get sympathy from his mistress. And she felt that cold, sharp contempt return. She gave him a small, sad smile. I have no idea what you're talking about, Daniel, she said softly. Then she turned back to Emma. Eat your peas, sweetie. He was beaten. He knew it. He threw his napkin onto his half-eaten food. I'm going out, he snapped. Okay, she said, not looking up. The front door slammed, rattling the windows. Emma flinched. Daddy is very loud, Emma said. Yes, he is, Rachel said, her voice a calm, smooth stone. He's just letting the house know he's leaving. She continued eating. She had won, but it felt hollow. This was the weight. The weight was the performance. The weight was the constant, exhausting effort of not feeling, of not reacting, of holding her entire self in check, every second, every minute, for the sake of her daughter. She was building a fortress, but she was also trapped inside it. Later that night, after the treasure hunt, the pencil case was under the sofa, after the bath, after the volcano story, after Emma was finally, peacefully asleep, Rachel came downstairs. The house was silent again. The real silence. The empty silence. Daniel was not back. She knew where he was. He was at a bar. Or, more likely, he was at her apartment. Madison B., the comforter, the sympathetic ear. He would be telling her, right now, how cold his wife was. How she was this strange, unfeeling robot. How she was driving him away. Poor Mr. Daniels. Rachel walked into the kitchen, the battlefield. The half-eaten plates were still on the table. His, with the napkin thrown in disgust. Hers, neat. Emma's, mostly clean. She picked them up. She rinsed them. She loaded the dishwasher. The ritual. The grounding. The motion sensor light under the cabinet flickered on as she passed. She caught her reflection in the dark glass of the microwave door. A face, pale, illuminated by the harsh white light from the cabinet above. She stopped. She stared. It wasn't her. It was not the young, hopeful woman who had moved into this house. It was not the tired, enduring wife who had lived here for years. It was not even the shocked, shattered victim from 2 weeks ago. The woman in the glass had dead eyes. They were clear. They were focused, but they were utterly devoid of light, of warmth. She looked like a soldier, a stranger, a woman who could look at the man she had loved, watch him implode, and feel nothing but a cold, distant pity. A woman who could lie to her child's face and call it protection. Who are you? She thought, her fingers tracing the cold glass. The woman in the reflection didn't answer. She just stared back, steady, and waited. This was the price. This was the inheritance. This was the woman her husband and her silence had created. And she was terrifying. Sunday. As was the ritual, Rachel took Emma to visit her grandmother. Driving to her mother's flat in Richmond, Rachel felt the sharp irony. She was leaving one quiet house only to enter another. Evelyn Morgan, 62, lived on the 3rd floor of an old but impeccably maintained brick building. The flat was small, and so tidy it was almost sterile. Everything had its place, and that place never seemed to change. The air smelled faintly of old books, lemon furniture polish, and a constant weak brew of Earl Grey tea. Evelyn was a thin woman, her gray hair pulled into a tight, neat bun. She had Rachel's same watchful eyes, but in Evelyn, the stillness had long since calcified. It was permanent. She was a statue of endurance, someone who had held a position for so long she'd forgotten her original shape. There she is, my darling. Evelyn's face lit up, her one truly genuine smile of the day, always reserved for Emma. She swept the little girl into a hug. I've baked biscuits. Shall we read the dinosaur book? Yes, Emma squealed, immediately running to the corner of the living room that was meticulously set up for her, complete with coloring books and educational toys. Evelyn turned to Rachel. The smile for Emma vanished, replaced by a thinner, more polite version. Come in, Rachel. You look tired. It was their standard greeting, an observation, not a question. I'm fine, Mum, Rachel said, the standard reply. She slipped off her coat, hanging it on the hook it had hung on for 20 years. It's warm in here. Shall I make tea? Evelyn asked. But it wasn't a question. She was already moving to the kitchen. This was their dance, a choreography of politeness, of carefully maintained distances. For years, Rachel had found it suffocating. But today, after weeks of studying Daniel, Rachel looked at her mother, truly looked at her, for the first time. She didn't see a mother. She saw a mirror. The way she arranged the teacups on the tray, with a near robotic precision. The way she avoided direct eye contact when she spoke. The way she filled the space with actions, with doing, rather than with words. It was her. It was her own method of coping with Daniel. The neutrality, the polite distance, the silence, disguised as tidiness. They sat in the living room. Emma was chattering to herself and the dinosaurs. Evelyn handed Rachel her cup. So, Evelyn began. How is work? The same, busy, with the end of the quarter. And Daniel? Working hard, I suppose? There it was. The perfunctory question. For years, Rachel's answer had been, yes, he's fine, very busy. But today, Rachel stared at the woman who had made her. She saw the lines around her mouth, etched not from laughter, but from a lifetime of pressing her lips together. She saw the profound, bone-deep weariness in her eyes, a weariness that had been there since Rachel was a child. And Rachel, the anthropologist of her own family's ruin, decided to try something new. She would not lie, not entirely. Mom, she said, her voice even, we're not okay. Evelyn froze, her teacup hovering in midair. She looked at her daughter, really looked. Not okay, she repeated, as if tasting a foreign word. He's distant, Rachel said, choosing her words carefully. And cold. And I think he's seeing someone. She had said it, out loud. And the room, with its smell of polish, seemed to hold its breath. Rachel expected her mother to be shocked, to be outraged, to ask for details. Evelyn did none of those things. She placed her cup back on its saucer with a small, sharp click. She looked out the window, where a starling was preening itself on the balcony rail. Betrayal, Evelyn said, her voice distant, is never the beginning, Rachel. It's the result. A chill went down Rachel's spine. The result of what? Evelyn turned to look at her. Her eyes were no longer vague. They were sharp as glass. Of silence. Of hundreds, thousands of silent dinners. Of closed doors instead of arguments. Of choosing peace over truth. She sipped her tea. Did you think I didn't know about your father? She said, almost casually. Did you think I didn't know about his business trips? About the different perfume on his shirts when he thought I was asleep? Rachel was stunned. Her parents had divorced when she was in university. The reason given was always irreconcilable differences. It had been a civilized, quiet divorce. I didn't know, Rachel stammered. Of course you didn't, Evelyn said, a rare, bitter edge to her voice. Because I chose silence. I thought it was the decent thing to do. I thought I was keeping the family together. I thought I was protecting you. And as she spoke, the walls of Rachel's memory began to crumble. A flood of images, not of loud fights, but of the absence of them, rushed in. Flashback 1. Rachel, 8 years old, at the dinner table. An empty chair. Her father is late. Evelyn comes from the kitchen carrying a plate of food. She sets it on the table, next to an empty plate for him. She sits down. Eat, Rachel. It'll get cold, she says, her voice artificially bright. And they eat. The two of them, in absolute, crushing silence. The only sounds are their forks and knives. The ticking of the wall clock is louder than their breathing. The house is waiting. Rachel's entire childhood was spent waiting. Flashback 2. Rachel, 12 years old. The middle of the night. She's woken up to use the bathroom. She hears the front door open, then close, very softly. She hears her father's footsteps on the stairs, trying to be quiet. And then, another sound. The kettle whistling, downstairs. Her mother is awake. Rachel hides in the hallway shadow. She watches her father go into the bedroom. And she listens to her mother in the kitchen, making tea. No one says a word. No where were you? No shouting. Nothing. Just the sound of boiling water. Just a thick, heavy, suffocating silence. Flashback 3. Rachel, 15. Her father is trying to talk to her. How's school, honey? He asks, trying to be cheerful. Before Rachel can answer, her mother sweeps in, holding a basket of clean laundry. Rachel, look! I ironed that dress you like, Evelyn says, her smile bright but not reaching her eyes. Can you help me put this away? She deflected. She changed the subject. She used business. She used domesticity to build a wall between them, a performance of normality, a perfect neutrality. Rachel came back to the present. She was breathing shallowly, as if she'd been running. She stared at her mother. This woman had taught her everything she knew about being a wife, not with words, with actions. She had taught her that when men are distant, women should be quiet and wait. She had taught her that confrontation was ugly, that preserving the appearance of a happy family was more important than having one. She had taught her to swallow her anger, to wash it down with tea and polite lies, until it became a part of her. Daniel hadn't just married Rachel. He had married Evelyn's legacy. Rachel's voice was shaking. I'm doing the exact same thing. It wasn't a question. It was a confession. I'm being silent, she whispered, tears finally, hotly, welling in her eyes. I'm being silent, and I'm watching, and I'm hating him. And Emma, God, Emma is watching. She's seeing me fail. Evelyn reached across the table. For the first time in years, her touch wasn't a polite pat. She grabbed Rachel's hand. Her own hand was thin, but surprisingly strong. I thought I was protecting you, Evelyn said, her voice hoarse. I thought if I'd just kept the house quiet, if I never argued, your father would remember me. He didn't. He just drifted further. My silence gave him permission. She looked straight into Rachel's eyes, the truth naked between them. I didn't protect anything. I just delayed the pain. And it taught you the wrong lesson. It taught you that love looks like endurance. She shook her head, a small, sad gesture. That isn't love, Rachel. It's just a long, slow failure. The conversation ended there. Evelyn, exhausted by the honesty, retreated into her grandmother role. Rachel, shattered to her core, moved on autopilot, clearing the tea things. On the drive home, as the late afternoon sun turned the rooftops red, Rachel watched Emma in the rearview mirror. She was asleep, sucking her thumb, a habit she only had when she was deeply tired. Rachel didn't see her daughter. She saw herself, 8 years old, eating dinner in silence. She saw her mother making tea in the middle of the night, alone in the dark. She saw the inheritance. It wasn't money or property. It was a method, a toxic, silent coping mechanism, passed from mother to daughter. The quiet house. It wasn't just the house she shared with Daniel. It was the house she had grown up in. It was the house she was building for Emma. The shiver that ran down her spine wasn't from the cold. It was terror. The terror that she couldn't escape. The terror that Evelyn was in her blood. That silence was her destiny. The visit hadn't brought her comfort. It had brought her a warning, a terrible prophecy. She realized that leaving Daniel wasn't enough. Leaving was just running. She had to break the cycle. She had to speak. She had to shout. She had to confront. She had to do the one thing her mother never did. She had to burn the quiet house, both past and present, to the ground. The visit to Evelyn's flat was a pivot. Rachel returned to her own quiet house with a cold, hard resolve that was no longer just observational. It was operational. The revelation that her silence was not a weapon but an inheritance, a toxic, learned helplessness, had changed the rules of the game. She was no longer just an anthropologist. She was now an escape artist. Daniel, oblivious, mistook her continued, calm neutrality for a form of surrender. He seemed to think she had accepted their new, cold normal, and with this perceived acceptance, he grew bolder. The performance of being a good husband was dropped entirely, even in its most minimal form. He was no longer just distant, he was increasingly absent. Working late became dinner with clients. Dinner with clients became overnight conferences. He announced the first one on a Tuesday. "I've got to go to Manchester for 2 days," he said, not looking at her. He was at the hall mirror, adjusting his tie, already dressed in his travel suit. "Oh?" Rachel said, pausing in the act of tying Emma's shoelaces. "When?" "Tomorrow. It's a last-minute thing. Big pitch." "I see," she said. Her voice was perfectly flat. She gave the lace a final, firm tug. "We'll be fine." He seemed almost disappointed she didn't question it. "Right. Well, I'll be back Friday afternoon." He left. Rachel, the accountant, knew that narratives were emotional, but data was fact, and she was a woman who trusted data. That evening, while Daniel was packing, she sat at the kitchen laptop, the family laptop, to pay the electric bill. She was logged into their shared email, the one they used for bills and household admin, and there it was, not an email. A pop-up on the shared Google Calendar they hadn't actively used in years, but which still quietly hoovered up their digital lives. A calendar event, confirmation, Manchester Marriott, 1 king bed, non-smoking, check-in, date, check-out, date. It had been pulled automatically from his Gmail. He hadn't booked a last-minute trip. He had booked this 3 weeks ago. The coldness spread through her. The casual, arrogant foresight of the lie. A second thought, sharp and acidic, pricked her. Muddy. She opened a new browser tab. She was not on his social media, but she knew Madison B's full name from the WhatsApp notification. She typed it into Instagram. The profile was public. Rachel scrolled down. 4 posts, 5, 6, and there it was, posted last night. A picture of a new, ridiculously small suitcase. The caption, "So excited for my first proper business trip. Manchester, here I come, # work perks, # marketing life." The dates matched. Rachel closed the laptop. She felt nothing, no rage, no spike of adrenaline. It was the opposite. It was a complete and total void. The last, flickering ember of her marriage had just been extinguished. She had the video, she had the email, and now she had the hotel. She had the what, the why, and the where. The case was closed, but the conversation with her mother echoed in her head. My silence gave him permission. If she said nothing now, she was repeating the cycle. She was becoming Evelyn. But if she confronted him, he would lie. He would gaslight her. He would turn it around, call her crazy, call her controlling, say she was snooping. He would make her the villain, and then he would learn to be a better liar. He would cover his tracks. He would hide the money. He would make the inevitable escape messy and difficult. She realized, with a chilling clarity, that Evelyn's mistake wasn't just the silence. It was the lack of a plan. Confrontation was emotional. Evidence was practical. Rachel would not be emotional. She would be practical. She would not be her mother. She would be an accountant. The next day, after she dropped Emma at school, she did not go to work. She went to a stationery shop. She did not buy a diary with flowers or a lock. She bought a thick A4 hardback ledger, the kind with lined, numbered pages and a sober dark blue cover. It was a book for accounts. That night, with Daniel in Manchester and Emma fast asleep, Rachel sat at the kitchen table. The same spot where she'd discovered the phone. The same spot where she drank the water. The house was perfectly silent. She opened the ledger. She took a pen. On the first page, she wrote, Morgan v. Morgan. And then she began to write. She was not writing feelings. She was logging evidence. She wrote with the clinical, detached precision she used for a corporate audit. Date of phone discovery. Event, discovered D's phone. WhatsApp thread with Madison B. Estsch. Evidence. Video of me, taken 10 p.m. Sent to MB with message. This is exactly why I'd rather work late than come home. MB. Response. Poor Mr. Daniels. Coming home must feel like a punishment. Note. Clear breach of marital trust. Use of private, non-consensual video to solicit sympathy from a third party. Date of email discovery. Event, Observed open email on D's office computer. Draft to MB. Evidence, deleted sentence. Sometimes I wonder if things would be easier if I'd met you first. Replaced with invitation for drinks. Note. Indicates a desired, rather than actual, emotional relationship. A wish to erase the family. Date. Today's date. Event. D on last-minute business trip to Manchester. Evidence. 1. Google Calendar confirmation for Manchester Marriott. Booked 3 weeks prior. 2. Public Instagram post from MB confirming business trip to Manchester, same dates. Note. Premeditated, coordinated deception. Likely start of physical affair. She wrote for an hour. She documented everything. The small, daily lies. The financial discrepancies she'd started to notice. The dates, the times, the exact quotes. It was a ledger of their dissolution. This was not silence. This was preparation. This was how she would break the cycle. She would not endure. She would document. She became meticulous. The ledger was her one true companion. She kept it hidden in the bottom of her tax return box, a place Daniel would never, ever look. Every night, after he'd fallen asleep, or on the nights he was working late, she would retrieve it and make her entries. The act of writing, of translating the chaos and pain into neat, factual lines, was the only thing that kept her sane. It was a container for her rage. Weeks passed. The autumn rains became a cold winter sleet. The ledger was a quarter full. It was a Saturday afternoon, cold, gray, and wet. Daniel was, predictably, at the office. Rachel was in the kitchen, the ledger open on the table. She was cross-referencing a credit card statement she'd printed. A charge for the Gilded Lily, a restaurant, £150, on a night he claimed he'd eaten at his desk. She was so focused, so deep in her own forensic analysis, that she didn't hear the small, quiet footsteps. "Mommy?" Rachel jumped, her hand instinctively slamming the ledger shut. But it was too late. Emma was standing there in her socks, holding her volcanoes drawing from school. "Mommy, what are you writing?" "Oh, sweetheart," Rachel said, her heart hammering. She forced a smile. "It's just boring work, baby. Just numbers." "It doesn't look like numbers," Emma said. She was a child who noticed everything. She had her mother's eyes. "Come on, let's hang your drawing on the fridge." Rachel stood up, moving to block the table. But Emma, being 6, was fast and curious. She darted past her toward the book. "What's it called?" she asked, her head tilted. She was learning to read, and was proud of it. She pointed a small finger at the spine. Rachel had written nothing there. She pointed instead at the open page. "That's a D," she said proudly. "D-A-D-D-Y. Daddy." Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. Emma squinted, her finger moving. "And R-O-N-G. Wrong?" She looked up at her mother, her eyes wide and perfectly, terrifyingly clear. "Mommy, did Daddy do something wrong?" The question, it hung in the air of the quiet kitchen. This was it, the moment, the generational transfer of pain, happening right in front of her. Her own child, pulled into the adult failure. Rachel's training, her numbness, her neutrality, it all vanished. There was only this small, perfect face, looking to her for the truth. This was the wound she had to prevent. She sank to her knees, so she was eye to eye with her daughter. The lie was ready on her tongue. No, it's just a story. But she remembered her mother's protective lies. She remembered the lifetime of damage they had done. She took a shaky breath. She would not lie. But she could not tell the truth. She chose a third path. "No, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick. She stopped. She closed her eyes. "No," she said again, her voice softer. It's not like that. It's just," she reached out, tucking Emma's hair behind her ear. Sometimes adults forget how to love each other." Emma just stared, her brow furrowed, trying to understand this strange, sad, adult logic. Like when you forget your lunchbox. A small, choked sound, half laugh, half sob, escaped Rachel's throat. "Yes, sweetie, exactly like that. Only much, much bigger." "Oh," Emma said. She accepted this, as children do. "Can I have some juice?" "Of course, my love. Of course." Rachel stood up. Her legs were shaking. She turned to the fridge. She took out the carton of apple juice. She poured it into Emma's favorite unicorn cup. And as she did, she felt a sudden, sharp wetness on her own cheek. A tear. She hadn't even felt it coming. Another one followed, splashing silently onto the back of her hand as she held the cup. She hadn't cried. Not when she saw the video, not when she read the email, not when she found the hotel booking. But she was crying now. Crying because her daughter, her innocent 6-year-old daughter, had been forced to read the word daddy next to the word wrong. She quickly, angrily, wiped the tears away with her sleeve. She handed the cup to Emma. "Here you go, my love." Emma took the juice and ran off to the living room. The crisis over. Rachel stayed at the counter, her back to the open ledger. She leaned against the sink, her hands gripping the cold granite edge. She had not been strong enough. The wound was repeating. The poison was leaking out. Her silence, her documentation, her careful, secret plan, it wasn't enough to protect her daughter. The quiet house was too quiet, and the rot was setting in. She realized, with a new, sudden terror, that her plan was missing one final, crucial element, an end date, the when. She looked at the ledger, still open on the table. The time for documenting was almost over. The time for acting was beginning. The ledger was no longer a place of solace. It was a prison. The incident with Emma had changed the very air in the house. Rachel, who had been a ghost, was now a person on high alert. Every moment Emma was in the same room as the hidden ledger felt like a physical risk. The house was no longer just quiet. It was tense. It was a string, pulled taut, vibrating at a frequency only Rachel could feel. She knew she had to act. She had the what, the why, the where, and the how. Her ledger. She just needed the when. She had been waiting for the right moment. A financial quarter end. A school holiday. But the universe, she was learning, does not wait for a convenient schedule. It delivers the when without asking. It came on a Tuesday, 3 days after Emma had read the ledger. The air was freezing, a sharp, clear, biting cold. Daniel had called, his voice clipped. "Going to be late. Big client dinner. Don't wait up." He had been saying that a lot. The dinners were getting later, the conferences more frequent. He had, Rachel noted, stopped trying to invent creative lies. He had just become lazy. He was treating his marriage with the same contempt he treated the household chores. It was something he assumed would just get done by someone else. Rachel had followed the ritual. Dinner with Emma, the volcano story, the treasure hunt, this time for a missing sock, bath, bed. She had sat in the quiet living room, the ledger on her lap, but she couldn't write. She was just listening to the house settle, listening to the pipes groan, listening for the sound of the key in the lock. She was done documenting. She was done observing. She was simply waiting. A predator, still and patient, in the dark. At 1:17 a.m., the key turned. The sound was clumsy, fumbling. He scraped the metal against the plate twice before it slotted in. "He's drunk," she thought. The door opened, letting in a gust of frigid night air. He stepped in. He stood in the dark hallway, swaying slightly, trying to toe off his shoes. He fumbled with the light switch. It clicked on. The harsh, sudden light of the hallway was brutal. Rachel, sitting in the shadows of the living room, could see him perfectly. His tie was gone. His top 2 buttons were undone. His hair, usually so perfect, was messy, as if a hand, not his own, had been running through it. And then, the smell hit her. It rolled down the hallway, overpowering the familiar, faint scent of their home's wood polish and her own subtle soap. It was perfume. It was not a scent she had ever worn. It was not a scent she would ever wear. It was heavy, cloying, musky. The kind of perfume that is designed to be noticed. The kind that is meant to linger. It smelled of medicine. He hadn't seen her. He turned, unsteadily, to hang his coat. He was humming. A quiet, tuneless, satisfied hum. The sound of a man who was happy. The sound of a man who had just left the arms of someone he wanted to be with. That hum. That simple, happy, drunken hum. It was the final, twisting blade. It was the sound of his complete and total disrespect. He wasn't even trying to hide his joy, his relief at being away from here, from her. He turned, and finally he saw her. He flinched. A sharp, guilty jolt. "God, Rachel," he slurred, a hand going to his chest. "You scared the hell out of me. What are you doing sitting in the dark? It's creepy." Rachel didn't move. She remained on the sofa, her hands resting on the closed ledger in her lap. The living room was dark, but the bright hallway light behind him cast him in perfect silhouette. He was a dark shape, outlined in light, reeking of a stranger. "You're home late," she said. Her voice was not accusatory. It was not angry, it was flat, a simple statement of fact. "Yeah, well, client dinner. Told you." He was trying to sound annoyed, but the guilt made his voice shaky. He started to walk toward the kitchen. I'm getting some water." "How was she?" Rachel asked. He stopped. His back was to her. He did not move. "What? How was she?" Rachel asked again, her voice just as clear, just as calm. "Madison," he turned, slowly. His face, which had been slack with drink, was now sharp with panic. His eyes were wide. What are you talking about?" he stammered. "I was with clients. I was with Mark and Steve, from the firm. You're drunk." "I'm not the one who's drunk, Daniel," Rachel said. She finally stood up. She walked out of the shadows and into the edge of the hallway light. She saw his face. He looked pathetic. A boy caught stealing. "You smell of her," Rachel said. It was not a guess. "It's all over you. It's very strong." Daniel's face went through a rapid series of emotions. Panic, denial, and then, finally, something else. Righteous, alcohol-fueled anger. "And so what?" he spat. "So what if I was? What do you care?" He had confessed. Just like that. The dam had broken. You've been this ice queen for months," he said, his voice rising, slurring. "You've been walking around this house like a ghost. Like you hate me. You barely look at me." "I am looking at you, Daniel," Rachel said. And she was. She was looking at him as if for the first time. The man she had loved. The father of her child. He was a weak, cowardly, drunk man, blaming his wife for his own betrayal. She felt that familiar, cold contempt rise. But this time, it was mixed with something else. A vast, profound pity. He was so small. "You didn't answer my question," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. What question?" It's not about the sex, Daniel. I honestly don't care about that. That's just a symptom." She stepped closer. He flinched, as if she might hit him. She just looked at him. "Are you in love with her?" The question hung in the air. The hallway light hummed. The ticking clock from the kitchen. This was it. The moment her mother never had. She was not accusing. She was asking. She was not attacking. She was offering a final, terrible truth. Daniel stared at her. His eyes, bleary and red-rimmed, held hers. He opened his mouth. A lie was forming. "Of course not. Don't be ridiculous." But he looked at her face. He looked at her calm, steady, dead eyes. And he knew that a lie would not work. Not anymore. He had been judged, he had been measured, and he had no answer. He didn't say yes. He didn't have to. He just looked away. He broke eye contact. He dropped his gaze to the floor. He couldn't look at her. He couldn't face her. And that was it. The silence. His silence. It was the loudest confession in the history of the world. It was a yes that echoed in the quiet house, shaking its very foundations. Rachel stood there. She had the truth. She had it. She had done what her mother couldn't. She had forced the confrontation. She had won. She had her evidence. She had her confession. So, why did she feel like she was dying? A sound escaped her. A small, strange, choked sound. It wasn't a sob. It was a gasp. Daniel, hearing it, looked up. A flicker of hope? Or was it fear? "Rachel?" She took a step back. And another. The strength, the cold neutrality, the ice queen he had described, it all shattered. It evaporated. Because in that moment, she didn't see him. She saw her mother. She saw her, in her sterile flat, her face tight, talking about a lifetime of silent endurance. "My silence gave him permission. It taught you that love looks like endurance." "Oh God," Rachel whispered. Her hands flew to her mouth. She wasn't crying for him. She wasn't crying because she had lost him. She was crying because she was her mother. She had done it. She had repeated the tragedy, step for step. The silent dinners, the watching, the waiting, the slow, cold gathering of evidence. She had endured. She had waited until he was drunk and clumsy and reeking of another woman to finally get the truth. She had lived out her mother's entire, failed life in the span of 3 months. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She wasn't better. She wasn't stronger. She was just a copy. A sad, pathetic echo. The tears came. Not the single, noble tear she had shed for Emma. This was a flood. A storm. A raw animal, broken sound tore from her throat. It was the sound of a woman who had not just been betrayed by her husband, but by her own history, by her own blood. She doubled over, clutching the ledger to her chest as if it were a shield. No, 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 she gasped. She was crying for the wasted years. She was crying for the woman in the microwave reflection. She was crying for the 8-year-old girl eating dinner in silence. She was crying because, in her attempt to not be her mother, she had become her in the most complete and devastating way. She had become a woman who had to wait for a man to destroy her life before she felt she had permission to leave it. Daniel just stared. He was sober now. The shock had burnt the alcohol away. He had been prepared for anger. He had been prepared for screaming. He was not prepared for this primal, grieving collapse. "Rachel," he said, his voice small. He took a step toward her. I don't, she choked out, her voice ragged. She held up a hand. "Don't touch me." She turned and fled. She ran up the stairs, sobbing, clutching the ledger. She didn't go to their bedroom. She couldn't. She ran to the one safe place. She pushed open Emma's door and fell against it, sliding down to the floor in the dark. She sat on the carpet in the room with the unicorn nightlight, and she wept. She wept for the loss of her marriage, but more, so much more, she wept for the horrifying, suffocating, undeniable realization that she was, and always had been, her mother's daughter. The quiet house had won. She woke to the sound of birds. It was a cruel, ordinary sound. For a single, disoriented second, she didn't know where she was. The light was wrong. It was pink, and it was coming from a glowing unicorn on the wall. Then, the pain hit. Not the emotional, hysterical pain from last night. This was a physical, dull, grinding ache. Her neck was stiff from sleeping sitting up. Her knees ached from the cold floor. Her eyes were swollen, sandy, and burned from a night of acid tears. She was on the floor of Emma's room. The ledger was beside her, its cover slightly warped, as if she had been crying on it. She heard a sound from downstairs, a muffled thud, the sound of a cabinet closing. He was up. The man who was in love with another woman. He was in her kitchen, probably making coffee. The sheer, domestic audacity of it, the mundane continuation of life, was so grotesque it almost made her laugh. Last night, a marriage had died, in the most brutal, agonizing way. And this morning, the killer was making coffee. She looked at Emma. Her daughter was still asleep, a small, perfect lump under the unicorn duvet. Her breathing was the only clean, pure sound in the entire house. The realization from last in the hallway came back, not as a scream, but as a cold, flat statement. I am my mother. She had walked the same path. The silence, the endurance, the watching, the waiting. Waiting until the man had finally, mercifully, given her an excuse to break. She had needed his confession, his perfume, his drunken admission, as permission. Evelyn had waited 20 years. Rachel had done it in 3 months. A small, cold thought followed, chilling her to the bone. And what did Evelyn do the morning after her confrontation? She got up, and she made tea, and she stayed. She stayed for another 10 years, in the quiet, polite, soul-destroying silence. Rachel stood up, her joints cracked in the quiet room. She looked at her sleeping child. No, she whispered. It was the quietest, most powerful word she had ever spoken. It was not a no of defiance. It was a no of correction. A no that rewrote the code. I am my mother's daughter, but I will not be her. The realization was not a sentence. It was not a destiny. It was a warning. And she had, just barely, heard it in time. The cycle had not repeated. It had only rhymed. And this was the morning she would break the rhyme scheme. Forever. She was done. The grief was gone. The hysteria was burned out. All that was left was a cold, bright, surgical clarity. She left Emma's room, closing the door softly. She walked down the hall to their bedroom. He wasn't there. She could hear him downstairs now, the sound of the Sky News anchor's voice from the television. He was watching the morning news. The room was a mess. His clothes from last night were in a heap on the floor. The suit, the shirt, it all reeked. That perfume. She walked past it, to the wardrobe. She did not pull out a large suitcase for herself. She pulled out Emma's small, ladybug-themed rolling bag. She laid it on the bed, on her side, the side that was still neatly made. She moved with a speed and precision that was almost terrifying. She was not a wife. She was not a victim. She was an extraction team. She went to Emma's room. She did not wake her. She just packed. The unicorn pajamas, the school uniform, hanging, ready for Monday, the gray, worn rabbit, the volcano drawing, pulled from the wall. 5 minutes. The bag was full. She took it back to the master bedroom. Then she pulled out her own small, overnight bag. She did not pack her life. She packed for a trip, underwear, socks, 3 sweaters, 2 pairs of jeans, her toothbrush. She walked to her bedside table, her keys, her wallet. She walked to her wardrobe. On the top shelf, in a box marked Tax to 1, she retrieved the dark blue ledger. She put it in her handbag. It was the heaviest thing she owned. She zipped the bag. The sound was like a zipper in a morgue. Loud, final, zip. Rachel? She looked up. He was standing in the doorway. He looked awful. He was pale, his skin a sickly gray. His eyes were red-rimmed and puffy. He was wearing his work-from-home tracksuit, and he was holding the mug of coffee he had just made. He looked, for all the world, like a man with a terrible hangover. Rachel, he said again, his voice a gravelly croak. Last night, He was looking for the words to fix it, the words to manage it. I was drunk. I didn't mean it. It was a mistake. She didn't give him the chance. She just looked at him, her face as blank and calm as a frozen lake. He saw the bags on the bed. His face, which was already pale, went ashen. What are you doing? He whispered. I'm packing, she said. Packing? He tried to laugh. A small, terrified sound. What, like you're going to your mother's? For a few days? Okay. Good. That's probably good. We need some space. To talk. He was shrinking the moment. He was trying to frame it as a fight. A domestic spat. Rachel picked up her handbag. She slung it over her shoulder. No, she said. She picked up her own small suitcase. She walked past him, out of the room. He didn't move. He just stood there, holding his coffee, as she walked into Emma's room. Rachel, wait! He called, his voice rising in panic. He followed her, thumping down the hall. We need to talk about this. We have to, for Emma. She had stopped at Emma's door. She turned to face him in the narrow hallway. For Emma? She repeated. The words were quiet, but they cut him. Yes, for Emma. We can get help. Counseling. I'll stop. I'll stop whatever you want. I swear. I'll stop. She looked at this man, this stranger who had been her life. This man who had hummed. Stop what, Daniel? Lying? Or loving her? He had no answer. His mouth just opened and closed. Don't do this, he begged. He was pleading now. The manager was gone. This was just a terrified, guilty man. Don't leave me. You can't just leave. And there it was. The moment. The choice. Her mother or her. Rachel looked at him. She saw the desperation. She saw the fear. She saw the man who had filmed her. And she felt nothing. The Ice Queen had finally arrived. I'm not leaving, Daniel. He looked confused. A flicker of desperate hope. But the bags? No, she said. Her voice was the quietest, coldest, most final sound that had ever been in this house. I'm just stopping pretending. He stared. He didn't understand. She clarified it for him, one last time. I am stopping pretending that this is a marriage. I am stopping pretending that you are a husband. I am stopping pretending that my silence is just a mood and not a scream. She took a breath. I am stopping pretending that this quiet house is a home. It's not. It's just a place where 2 very, very sad people go to sleep. Rachel, please. His voice was broken. I'm going to wake up my daughter now, she said, her voice flat, as if giving instructions to a new intern. I am going to tell her we are going on an adventure. I am going to dress her. And then we are going to walk out the front door. She turned her back on him. She entered Emma's room. She heard a sound behind her. A crash. She turned back. He was on his knees in the hallway. He had dropped the coffee mug. It had shattered, and hot brown coffee and shards of white ceramic were everywhere. He wasn't trying to clean it up. He was just kneeling in it. Don't take her, he wept. It was his last card. The child. Please, Rachel, not Emma. You can have anything. The house, the money, just don't take her. For a second, she almost pitied him, but then she remembered the video, the email, the hotel, the hum. You did this, she said. It was not an accusation, it was a balance sheet, a final entry in the ledger. You made this choice, Daniel? Not me. I'm just the consequence. She closed the door, leaving him weeping in the mess. She woke Emma, gently. Mommy, it's dark. I know, sweetie. We're going on an adventure, a surprise trip. She dressed her daughter, who was still half asleep. She picked up the ladybug suitcase. She took Emma's hand. Where are we going? Emma mumbled, clutching her rabbit. Somewhere new, Rachel said. She opened the door. Daniel was still there. He had moved. He was slumped against the wall, his face in his hands. The mess was still there. He didn't look up. He just made a strange, wounded sound as she walked past him. One hand on her daughter, the other on the suitcase. She walked down the stairs. She did not look back. She walked to the front door. She put her hand on the lock. She opened it. A wall of gray, wet air hit her. It was pouring. A cold, miserable, driving rain. The exact same rain from the morning she had found the phone. A perfect, terrible circle. Mommy, it's raining, Emma said, her voice small. I know, baby, Rachel said. We'll be quick. She did not run. She walked. She walked down the path, her daughter's hand in hers. She walked to the car. She opened the back, put Emma in her car seat, buckled her in. Keep Mr. Rabbit safe, she said. She put the suitcases in the boot. She got into the driver's seat. The rain was so loud it was all she could hear. It hammered on the roof. A frantic, angry drumming. She put the key in the ignition. She looked, one last time, at the house. He was standing in the doorway now, a silhouette, just a dark, empty shape in a brightly lit doorway. He was not her husband. He was not her friend. He was just the man who lived in the quiet house. She started the car. The wipers snapped to life, slashing across the glass. Thwack, thwack, trying uselessly to clear the view. She put the car in reverse. She pulled away from the curb, and the camera does not follow her. It stays. It pushes past the broken man in the doorway. It moves through the empty hallway, past the shattered mug and the dark, cooling coffee. It moves into the kitchen. The house is absolutely silent, save for the sound of the rain lashing against the window. On the counter, by the sink, sits an empty glass, the one she drank from, all those weeks ago. The one she'd had, the night she made her decision. A single heavy drop of rain slides, like a tear, down the outside of the kitchen window, blurring the view of the empty gray garden. The glass is empty. The house is empty. The silence remains. She did not drive to her mother's. That was the first and most important decision. To go to Evelyn's would be to trade one quiet, suffocating house for another. It would be running backwards. She drove, instead, into the anonymous, rain-lashed night. Emma, bundled and confused, had fallen back asleep in her car seat, her small face peaceful, oblivious to the fact that her entire world had just been fractured. Rachel drove for an hour, aimlessly, just following the green motorway signs that promised distance. She finally pulled off the M25 and into the car park of a Travelodge, a place of absolute neutrality, a place with no memory, no history, no judgment. The room was beige. The air smelled of industrial carpet cleaner. It was the most beautiful room she had ever seen. She laid Emma, still asleep, on one of the single beds and covered her with the thin, starchy duvet. Then, Rachel sat on the other bed, her wet coat still on, and she stared at the wall. The adrenaline was gone. The clarity was gone. She was just a 34-year-old woman in a beige room with a sleeping child and two small, badly packed bags. The silence was absolute, and for the first time it was terrifying. Her phone, which she had put on the bedside table, began to vibrate. She looked at it. Daniel. It vibrated again and again. It was a frantic, desperate, angry buzzing, a trapped animal in a cage. She watched it skitter across the wood effect laminate. Please, Rachel, come home. We can fix this. You can't do this. You're scaring me. You're scaring Emma. Where are you? Rachel. You bitch, you can't just take my daughter. Pleading. Anger. Pleading. Bartering. She watched the messages roll in. A final, predictable performance. She remembered her mother's words. My silence gave him permission. Rachel picked up the phone. She did not answer. She pressed the power button, held it, and swiped to off. The room was silent again, but this time, it was a silence she had chosen. The next morning, she bought a new SIM card. She called her work. She did not speak to her manager, she spoke to HR. She used the words personal family emergency and indefinite leave. They were, to her surprise, understanding. She called a solicitor, a name she had found online. Richmond Family Law. She sat in a small, clean office. The ladybug suitcase at her feet. Emma was in the waiting room, bribed with a new coloring book and a packet of biscuits. The solicitor, a sharp woman named Priya, listened. She did not offer sympathy. She offered strategy. He's a high-earning professional, Priya said, her pen tapping. You are the primary caregiver. The court will look at this very clearly. I don't want to destroy him, Rachel said. The old habit of Evelyn speaking. I just want to leave. He destroyed himself, Mrs. Morgan, Priya said, her voice not unkind, but firm. You are just filing the paperwork. Do you have any evidence of his infidelity, of his financial contributions? It helps with the timelines. Rachel put her handbag on her lap. She unzipped it. She took out the dark blue ledger. She placed it on the desk. Morgan v. Morgan. Priya opened it. She read the first page. The video, the messages. She read the second. The email. She read the third. The hotel, the credit card statements. She read for 5 minutes. When she finally looked up, her professional, sharp expression had been replaced by something else. Respect. Mrs. Morgan, she said. This is not a woman scorned. This is an audit. This is the most thorough, concise, and irrefutable pre-trial document I have ever seen. She closed the ledger. You won't have to destroy him, she said. The truth will be enough. He will settle. He will settle fast. And he did. The moment Daniel was served with the petition, which included a single photocopied page from the ledger as an attachment, the phone call stopped. His solicitor, a man from a large, aggressive London firm, called Priya. They wanted to resolve this amicably. Amicably, Rachel learned, was a code word for, please don't show anyone else that book. Daniel, the man, was a weeping, broken, pathetic creature. Daniel, the asset, was a man terrified of exposure, and he was terrified of what his bosses, his clients, and medicine would think if they knew the truth. Not the truth that he'd had an affair, but the truth that he was a man who got caught, the man who filmed his wife, the man who wrote those emails. He was, as she had always known, a coward. He gave her the house. She refused. She did not want the quiet house. She did not want the blood-soaked kitchen. She did not want the hallway where her marriage had died. She wanted to be free. They sold the house. She got 60%. She got full custody of Emma. He got visitation every other weekend, supervised for the first 6 months. The system worked. The math, for once, was on her side. She saw her mother. Evelyn came to the new flat, the one in Richmond. It was small, 2 bedrooms. The paint was still fresh. It was on the top floor of a loud building, overlooking a busy street. It was nothing like the quiet suburban prison. Evelyn stood in the middle of the empty living room. There was no furniture, just boxes. It's small, Evelyn said. I know, Rachel said. She was unpacking a box of kitchen things. The noise? I know, Rachel said, smiling. You can hear life. Evelyn looked at her daughter. She looked at the woman who was not an ice queen, not a ghost, but just a person, in jeans and a sweater, with paint in her hair. He was a fool, Evelyn said. It was the closest to an admission she would ever get. Yes, Rachel said. He was. You did it, Evelyn whispered, her hand going to her mouth. You actually left. Rachel stopped unpacking. She walked over to her mother. No, Mom, she said, and she took her mother's thin, cold hand in her own warm one. We did. The fracture, the voice in her head, the one that narrated her life, told her the truth. The fracture did not heal. It was not a clean break. It was a shatter. There were days, in the beginning, in that new, empty flat, when the silence was not a comfort, it was an accusation. She would lie awake, terrified. She had done the wrong thing. She had broken her child's life. She would be alone forever. She was, and always would be, her mother's daughter, a sad, lonely woman in a tidy room. These were the bad days. On these days, she would go to Emma's room. Her daughter had insisted on painting it bright, volcanic yellow. She would stand in the doorway and just watch her sleep, and she would remember. Daddy did something wrong, and she would know, with absolute certainty, that the terror of freedom was infinitely better than the comfort of that quiet prison. The bad days became less frequent. The silence of the new flat began to change. It was no longer the silence of absence. It was the silence of possibility. It was the quiet of a page, waiting to be written on. 6 months passed. It is 8 a.m. The flat in Richmond is no longer empty. It is cluttered. It is cluttered with Emma's drawings, with a sofa Rachel bought secondhand, with a bright yellow rug, and with life. The sun, a real, bright London sun, is streaming through the window, catching the dust motes as they dance. In the small kitchen, Rachel is making breakfast. She is scrambling eggs. Emma is at the small table, which is pushed against the wall. She is not quiet. She is laughing, a full, bright, happy sound, as she tells a long, complicated story about a dream involving a unicorn and a volcano. Rachel listens, and she laughs too. It is not a performance. It is not a polite, empty sound. It is real. She slides the eggs onto 2 plates. She brings them to the table. She sits. She sips her coffee. She looks out the window at the busy street below. The noise of the traffic is just a distant, reassuring hum. Voiceover, internal. Some fractures never heal. The cracks are still there. I can feel them on the cold days. I know the shape of them. I know the ache of them. But Rachel closes her eyes. She is not perfect. She is not cured. She is not the woman she was. She is not the woman she was supposed to be. She is just here. Her face, in the morning light, is not the face of the ghost in the microwave. It is not the face of the ice queen. It is just a face. 35 years old, a little tired, but it is, for the first time in a very, very long time, at peace. Voiceover, internal. They only teach us how to walk differently. She opens her eyes. She smiles at her daughter. So, what did the unicorn say to the volcano? She asks. Emma gasps, delighted, and continues her story. Rachel just listens. The house is quiet, and it is good.